Welcome into the Action Network podcast presented by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Brendan Glasheen joined today by Billy Ward and Dan Stupp in for Sean Zerillo. You know what that means. UFC betting preview. We are back in Las Vegas. UFC Vegas 75 going down this weekend from the Apex Center in Las Vegas, Nevada. 12 fights, 6 on the main card, 6 prelims. If you are familiar with the podcast, you know the drill. If you're not, we break down the main event. We also preview the fight of the night, sometimes the co-main, favorite underdogs, favorite props, and then a best bet for the guys. And then we get in and get out. So thanks for stopping by if you are a regular listener to our UFC betting previews. This weekend's action, like I said, taking place at the Apex facility. The prelims are available on ESPN2. Main card airs on ESPN, 10 Eastern. And of course, if you have ESPN Plus, you can watch every fight there. So no pay-per-view for this particular weekend. All right, main event, Martin Vettori, Jared Cannonier. That is your main event for this weekend. Cannonier, Billy is at plus 104. Billy Ward, by the way, has the UFC luck rankings available over at luck ratings, kind of the same thing. Luck ratings available at actionnetwork.com. He previews the card, but also gives you, if he thinks the line that's if a fighter is undervalued or fairly valued or overvalued, etc. Cannonier plus 104. Vettori's the favorite minus 128. What comes to mind when you see these two fighters going head to head, and how do you want to bet this fight?
Yeah, this is an interesting main event, a little bit higher quality than we see at the Apex a lot of the time. In a way, this is almost like the bronze medal match of the middleweight division. Both guys have lost or beaten everyone other than Robert Whittaker and current champion Israel Adesanya in their last 7 or 8 fights, depending on how far back you look on each of them. So it's a great fight if, you're interested in the division and seeing who really is the best. Probably not, major title implications for either guys, just because we've seen them both in there with Adesanya and Robert Whittaker, who's pretty clearly the second best middleweight. But still a compelling fight. I'm really interested to see how this one plays itself out. I tweeted earlier in the week when Vettori was around even money, that just felt like free CLV if you wanted to take that one. And that's what we've seen. I think the sharp action has all came in on Marvin Vettori. I think you could even get him plus money at a certain point, maybe Monday or so. But I like the matchup for him. Vettori's a southpaw. He has really, really good footwork. When he was fighting Roman Dolidze in his last fight, he was almost constantly winning that battle of the lead foot, meaning getting his front foot outside of his orthodox opponents. That's going to be a major factor here against Cannonier. Both men have excellent leg kicks, but it's really hard to land that leg kick on an opposite stance person if your foot is to the inside of that. Now, Cannonier does like to switch his stances a little bit, but it's pretty obvious what he's doing. I noticed it just watching a couple fights. Every time he switches stances, he throws a big power kick from his rear leg. If I can pick up on that, just trying to break down this fight to bet on it, I'm pretty sure Vettori and his camp are going to be hip to that. Outside of that, Vettori's got much more volume. He's more active with his hands, in and out a lot, mixes levels pretty well. Cannonier's a little bit more powerful. He likes to hang on the back, uses super long reach to land big shots. But Vettori's fought guys like that before, and he's looked pretty good in those situations. He's pretty defensively sound. So I think ultimately what it comes down to, other than the leg kicks, is whether Cannonier is able to land that big shot. And Vettori's been in there with some dangerous strikers. He went the distance with Adesanya, which is very impressive, another tall, long guy who lands heavy shots. I think he'll be able to do that again. Given the line movement, though, I don't see Vettori coming here just starching Cannonier. That's why I'm going to my favorite, FanDuel betting option, where you can get 4 or 5 rounds 4, rounds 5, or by decision. If any of those happen, plus 110 on Vettori. Given the way the line's moved, I think that's a little bit better way to play this one. I know Dan's on a similar angle with that. If you really wanted to hedge or were worried about it, the inverse of that, Cannonier in the early rounds, I could see some value there. But I think the footwork and the movement and the leg kicks of Vettori are just going to be too much over time. Probably not going to be a late finish. I don't really see that happening, but the difference between that and the decision line isn't all that big, so I'm willing to cover my bet there.
We do have the receipts. That's what people do, right? They go to Twitter, keep the receipts. Well, Billy Ward was on Twitter Monday. Not sure if I'll end up betting it since I haven't gotten too much tape yet. She is now done. Vettori at even money, pretty much guaranteed free CLV right now if you're into that kind of thing. And Billy also adds, I was leaning Vettori before looking at the lines for what it's worth, thought he'd be minus 150 or so. So therefore, there is still value in Vettori, sort of, minus 128 compared to what Billy thought it would be. There you go. So, Dan, as Billy teased, you might be in a similar boat in terms of how you want to bet this middleweight clash.
Yeah, no, I think he really nailed the breakdown. I think it basically a big part of it comes just down to durability. I don't think Cannonier is going to be the first one to stop Vettori, with punches. And I think the longer the fight goes on, the more we see Vettori's durability and chin hang in there. Again, that's not going to be around forever, but until we see otherwise, I'm okay banking on it. The guy seems to be resilient to a degree we don't see a whole lot, especially at 185 where guys pack a lot of power. But I was originally leaning Vettori just straight up on the money line, even though obviously we missed some of the value earlier in the week. I really liked them at via decision at plus 130, but honestly, I think Billy's play, you're losing a little bit of the payoff by getting 2 extra rounds and accounting for a late stoppage, which is a very real possibility. I don't know. Like I said, I was initially going Vettori via decision. If you got access to the way Billy did it, with the kind of same game parlay with going to decision as around 4 or 5 at plus 110. I think either one of those are good options. I think Vettori's clearly the play.
Okay, looking elsewhere on the card, we'll get to the fight of the night in a moment. Favorite underdog, Billy. Is this a good underdog week?
I think it is. There's a few that I like. Some of them, like we see a lot, the value's left a little bit, but I'm still on Nicholas Dalby. Really fun fight against Muslim Salikov. This is one I'm interested in both betting and watching, as we talk about on this one. Muslim Salikov, they call him the king of Kung Fu. He has a Wushu or Sanda background, which is a combat sport originating out of China. And it's basically strikes with takedowns, but there's no groundwork once you get to the ground. So I can take you down, I can throw you, but then we just stand right back up and start punching each other again, which, carries over to MMA a lot better than some of the traditional martial arts the guys come in with. The issue I have with that is that Salikov doesn't have a great ground game. He'll get some takedowns, but usually doesn't do much with it, gets stood back up. And Dalby is kind of the opposite. Not a great wrestler, but he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. Both of his last 2 fights were pretty high-level grapplers, and he either at worst survived and at best won some of those grappling exchanges. So if I'm Salikov, I probably don't take it to the ground against Dalby. If you do, he might wrestle himself into trouble. So that's one angle. But I also really like the stand-up matchup for Dalby. With the Kung Fu style of Salikov, he really needs some distance and some time and space to do his stuff. And that's really hard against a guy like Dalby, who's constantly in your face, constantly shoving you against the fence, just throws a ton more volume. And honestly, similar to the Vettori Cannonier fight, I could see Salikov landing, some big spinning wheel kick or one of his trademark moves like that early in the fight. But if he doesn't get it early, I think it's all Dalby from there on out, just based on the volume, which helps him win some minutes. So this is one where if you're watching it live, you could hold out and maybe try to bet Nicholas Dalby after round 1, cover some of that threat of early stoppage and maybe even get a better line if he gets hurt. But at plus 162, I'm more than happy just covering taking the money line initially.
Dan, I know we'll get to the fight of the night. We can just really transition now. You've got an underdog play on the fight of the night, Sabatini and Almeida.
Yeah, I like Almeida here. I think Sabatini's stand-up, I don't think is really improving, and his durability, I think, is going to be a concern. And I think against a guy like Almeida, who looked great last time out, I think he's going to be the better striking. I think he's more than competent on the ground, and I think he'll probably want to keep this standing. I know he's had a series of canceled bouts, and it's been a while since we've seen him, but he was training for Killers. In those, I think he's going to be more than prepared. I feel like this should probably be lined a little closer to a 50-50. So getting plus 150, plus 160 in that neighborhood. I love that, especially for a fight. I want to watch it because it's one of my favorite bets, but I also want to watch it just because it's going to be a fantastic fight. We were talking earlier about sometimes we have bets we like with fights that we have no interest in watching, but this is the opposite. It's a bet I like and a fight I like.
So reading up, Billy, on your luck ratings, you actually think Sabatini is undervalued in this spot. Almeida is at plus 154 on the money line. So, and Dan likes Almeida. Where are you at with the fight of the night, this particular matchup?
Well, I did like Sabatini as an undervalued option earlier in the week, but he was minus 175, minus 180. Okay. I thought he was a little undervalued just because he kind of got a weird fluke-ish knockout in his last fight. It's not a fluke when a guy punches you in the face and renders you unconscious, right? Like, these guys train really hard to do that. But that's not something that you expect to happen all the time. It was a bit of a weird fight against Damon Jackson, whose brother had just died and was super emotionally charged. It was a whole thing. I don't think that really tells us a lot about Sabatini as a fighter or his ability. Then on the other side of that, while Almeida ended up getting a knockout in his UFC debut, he was hurt real bad in the first round. If you go back and watch that fight, there's a lot of refs who probably would have stepped in and stopped that one against Almeida in that fight against Mike Trezano. So he was kind of lucky in the sense of he was given the chance to come back. And obviously it was the right call by the referee to not, because he ended up winning. But if this fight is against 5-0 Patrick Sabatini against 0-1 Lucas Almeida, we'd see a much larger line. And we have, because it's moved, Sabatini now minus 215. I'm actually with Dan, where if I had to pick a side right now, I'd probably go to Almeida because the line has moved far. But what I said in my luck ratings is, given what we've seen from both guys, they've both been hurt in recent fights. It's kind of a binary matchup where Sabatini has a huge edge on the ground. Almeida should be much better on the feet. I said in the luck ratings, I think when the lines are released, the best bet is probably on under 2.5. That's minus 130. Love that now. I'm going to trust my gut from earlier in the week. Sometimes it's hard to trust the thing you said earlier as you get deeper into things. I'm going to do that this one. But even though I'm on the Sabatini side of his previous line, I actually do agree with Dan, given how much it's moved in his direction.
All right. Sabatini, 5-0 in the UFC at this point in his career.
4-1. I was saying he would be 5-0 had he not got that.
If he got it.
That was kind of my, when I look at the luck ratings, it's kind of like, what would this line be had close events like that played out differently? It's kind of my logic. So obviously he'd be a much different or much heavier favorite if those things had happened. They didn't, and I'm not saying it was lucky or unlucky to get knocked out, but it's not something we expect to happen every fight with a guy of his quality.
Gotcha. Okay, let's move on to the prop market. And these are always fun because a lot of times you get some good plus money. And I like it. We'll take you behind the curtain. Dan had a good line before we got started. Like, hey, some of these bets are just, if you're interested in winning money, these are bets we like, but do we actually want to sweat these out? I mean, we want to sweat them out. I understand that, but folks are tuning in for some long shot stuff like this. And that's sometimes what the prop market offers, because they tend to be long shot-ish. Billy, what are you looking this week for a prop?
Yeah, I'm looking at Teresa Bledza. Her nickname is Russian Ronda, as in Ronda Rousey, and that's not by accident. And her submission line is plus 460, which just seemed really long given how heavy of a money line favorite she is. She lost her UFC debut. She got knocked out in the third round. She's kind of a first round or first half of the fight or bust type fighter, but she had Natalia Silva in a couple submissions that were fairly close and just emptied the tank trying to finish them, and it didn't work. I think this is a better matchup for her. Natalia Silva, who she fought in her debut, is now 3-0 in the UFC and just looks like a monster. So I think she's able to get it done in this one. I also like her inside the distance line at plus 200 because, unlike her theoretical namesake here, she does go for a lot of ground and pound. She's not just hunting submissions, but plus 460, is kind of that prop squad style bet that we like to make. It's an easier opponent for her. She's an excellent, wrestler / judo player. I love this fight just because we get to further our debates of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu versus judo, which is, for people in the martial arts scene, is a battle that will never be solved, but we'll at least get one more data point on one side or the other this weekend.
Dan, where are we looking for a prop this weekend? UFC Vegas 75.
Yeah, going back to a fight we discussed earlier, or Billy discussed earlier, the Nicholas Dalby one. I actually, he made me kind of a believer earlier this week, and Dalby is a live underdog here, but I really feel like if he's going to win, he's just going to grind out a grimy decision and maybe pull away late. So taking Dalby by decision, he's already plus money just on the money line. You can bump that from plus 160 to about plus 260 if you take him via decision. I think that's his most likely path to victory. So I don't know, that could be kind of a fun fight for the MMA, I guess, the OGs. It could be a bit of a grimy one, but I think Dalby's a live dog, and I like him to win by decision.
And that's another one where if you're betting on our sponsor FanDuel, they have the round 3 or decision line, which I don't have off the top of my head, but obviously somewhere between the money line and the decision line. Just if you worry about a guy getting finished down the stretch, I don't really trust Salikov's cardio, which speaks to Dan's line as well, but also could raise the chance of a third round stoppage, especially with gentlemen of a certain age getting in there. Both guys are coming up on 40.
I was going to say, I forget who it was, but I think someone on our prop squad too is targeting round 2 and round 3 submissions. Maybe in that, or it might be another one. But yeah, I Billy, thanks for bringing that up.
It's tricky on these when you get I think we coined the phrase a few weeks ago, Brendan, cash the idea, where it's always sad when you cash the idea, but not the ticket, you know?
I was thinking about this in the car the other day. I'm like, what was the phrase that Billy and or Sean Zerillo said? It was the idea. You cash the idea, but not the bet.
But yeah, so, you're running the risk of some cash in the idea if Dalby gets a stoppage at 4 minutes in the third round, you have that decision prop. But obviously, we like to get paid out more money rather than less money. And if that's the likeliest outcome, that's a way to do that.
Cash the idea. That's phenomenal. Well, hopefully that doesn't happen. We want to cash the bets. Okay. With that said, final bets, best bets, inside joke. Billy, is this one a best bet that we're going to watch and enjoy, or bet and run away?
I wouldn't say this is necessarily a best bet. It's more of a final bet this weekend.
Okay.
I really like the Dalby play, I think, but obviously fits better as an underdog or prop. But I'm looking at Armen Petrosyan. He's plus 122 on FanDuel. I think if you shop around, you can get somewhere in the plus 130s. He's fighting Christian Leroy Duncan, who's kind of like one of the next hyped British prospects. Duncan has one UFC fight, and he won it because his opponent kind of had a freak knee injury up against the fence. So we don't know a ton about Duncan. What we do know is Petrosyan, 2-1 in the UFC, just faced a murderer's row his first couple fights. He fought RoboCop, and then Caio Bahaio, both of whom are combined to be 8-2 in the UFC, with one of those losses coming to Petrosyan. And Petrosyan has outstruck every opponent he's fought, right? He's a super high-level Muay Thai fighter. That's where his background is. And the UFC fed him to, grappling phenoms in his first couple fights. Duncan has a background as a high-level basketball player in England, which are, just a combination of words that don't make me think you can wrestle at all. And we haven't really seen him do it much. He has one submission in the Cage Warriors for one of his fights there, but it was more of a club and sub situation where he hurt a guy and snatched up a neck. And I'm just going to trust the high-level kickboxer to be able to win if the fight stays placed in his area, which it should. It's an intriguing fight because Petrosyan's not a big power guy, not a knockout artist. Duncan is the exact opposite. Duncan also has a huge reach edge, but that's been every fight for Petrosyan in the UFC, and he's overcame those factors so far. It's something we talked about earlier with Vettori. We don't know if it's chin or just you're so defensively sound that you're never getting really hit squarely, but Petrosyan has managed to eat what look like some pretty big shots and still put a pace on his opponents, lands a ton of leg and body kicks, which will pay dividends down the stretch. I think if we can avoid that early power surge from CLD, and CLD has only had one fight go to a decision. He's used to hitting people and they just collapse right there. So I think it's another one where we could wait and get a live line on Petrosyan that might be a little bit better after round 1. But since we're already getting plus money, I'm just going to play the money line, especially in the plus 130s that are out there.
All right. Excellent. And just to clarify, plus 126 available at FanDuel. So you're getting a little bit of a better price. On to Dan, best bet before we get out of here.
I have a feeling this could fall into the cash the idea, which kind of scares me a bit, but
he likes it. He likes it.
I'm going to take Alessandro Costa to win inside the distance. Part of this is I was kind of leaning Costa anyway. I do a lot of my betting kind of seeing what smart folks are also on. And I know a lot of folks that I really respect are on this fight. I think what it comes down to is his opponent, Jimmy Flick. I think there's too much value being put in his submission ability in this fight. And I think it's kind of tainting the line a bit. I think Flick does have a submission threat. I don't think it's as big as people are making it out to be. Costa's very competent on the ground. I think actually kind of prior to the UFC did a lot of his work on the ground, but he's going to have a huge striking edge. I worry about Flick's durability. I worry about his game planning in this if things don't go well for him right off the bat. So Costa inside the distance, I think it's minus 120, minus 130. You may even find a better line. And I think that's one too where we may, someone in the prop squad, I think, is targeting round 2, round 3 props for plus 600, plus 1,000 around there. So Costa inside the distance, I really like that one.
I like that one too. I was just going to add, those guys with the submission threat like that, Jimmy Flick specifically, who goes for, really wild and off the wall submissions, it's kind of like if you don't get it, you're putting yourself in a really bad spot to get knocked out. When you go for a flying triangle, awesome when it works, but when it misses, all of a sudden you're on your back, you just drop from 6 feet in the air, you're kind of disoriented. Flick is a guy, he'll get a good position on the ground, but sacrifice it to go for an armbar or something like that, which I think raises the odds of the inside the distance, which makes that a way better way to play this than the money line, because the money line does factor in that submission threat.
I think it's even money, plus 100.
Even better.
Nice. Over at FanDuel. There you go. All right, gents. That's going to do it for our UFC Vegas 75 betting preview here on the Action Network podcast. We are presented by FanDuel. Thanks to our friends at FanDuel. Find Dan and Billy in the Action Network app. You can also find Billy's luck ratings for this particular card over on actionnetwork.com in the app as well. If they add anything last minute, check the app. Billy, do we know if we get Cirillo back next week? No disrespect to Dan. I'm just curious.
Please.
I believe so. Last I heard, I am not 100% on that though. So
okay.
Someone will be here telling you who to bet on for next week's UFC.
Okay.
I will be one of those people. Who else it is?
Hey, Dan, thanks for being here. Appreciate you.
No problem. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Also, you can find Billy Ward's Nerfy baseball picks over in the Action app and on actionnetwork.com. Billy also contributes to our baseball content during the summer. Brendan Glasheen signing off. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. You have a great weekend. Enjoy the card. And we'll talk to you next week.